It's Learn Ubuntu Live, presented by learnubuntu.org, with your host, Tom Judge. This presentation is going to give you an introduction to the domain name system. The underpinnings of the Internet include the domain name system and a series of domain name servers. Then their job is to provide resolution of host names and URLs to IP addresses for us. It seems very simple and works quite seamlessly. However, without DNS, the Internet would not function as we know it today. Let's start this presentation on the domain name system, and we'll learn a little bit about this very important underpinning of the Internet. In our presentation on the history of the Internet, these two gentlemen, Mr. Paul Markopetris and John Postel, who were responsible for inventing DNS. Without that, we would be sending host files around to each other every day. We spend more time trying to find out who's where on the Internet than anything else. So thank God for four thinkers like these gentlemen who contributed, that we all may have a better life. So, if you look here, TCP/IP setting on most computers have a DNS setting, and I'll point that out to you. It's right down here. These are the DNS servers, primary and secondary. Okay? If you have a router at home, chances are that router is getting domain name server information from your ISP and passing it on to each client along with the DHCP information they get. The domain name system starts with the root hosts. There's more than one root host for each domain type. .com, .edu, .net, .info. There's a whole lot of them there. Originally it was .com, .net, and .edu. Now a whole lot more have been added. We have .biz. But each one of those has at least one, if not a series of, that provide the start of our DNS resolution. And I say the start because it's only the first step. Look at a URL. When you think about a URL can be dissected into three sections. We have the host name, the domain name, root domain type. So we have mail, which is a mail server, Learn Ubuntu, which is domain name, .org, because it's learnubuntu.org. Or we have www.learnubuntu.org. So, if you think about that, each URL you type has at least three sections, three parts. The host name, the domain name, and the root. Here's an illustration of how DNS works. And it's a little round robin type of thing that goes on. Okay? And I have the steps outlined in that in the lab details and in the readings. Okay? Basically, a request is made for a particular URL by a host PC. That request goes to its local DNS server, which then contacts the root service and said, hey, I'm trying to get to learnubuntu.org. What are the name servers for learnubuntu.org? So all the root server does, as part of its job, is tell the local DNS server the IP address of the official DNS server for that domain. Every time a domain is registered, you must have two DNS servers for that domain at a minimum. I happen to have four because I have two with Comcast and two with GoDaddy. Once the root server tells the local DNS server the IP address of that particular server, that server is responsible for resolving all the hosts in that domain. Your local DNS server will then requery the local domain and get the IP address for the host it's looking for. And a lot more goes on that. Again, this is just a basic introduction. When it comes to mail and things like that, there's a whole lot more going on. Now, here's a typical Etsy hosts file. Remember I said in previous presentations, in the olden days, before 1983, okay, when there was no DNS, the only way to get resolution on the internet was either to know the IP address or to have an entry in your hosts file. And we still have host files today on PCs. They're still used. You can override DNS information with a host file. And here is another important file on your machine, etsyresolve.config. That is the file that tells the TCP/IP stack what the domain name servers it has to use are. Now in the newer versions, this seems to be a lot more automated, and it's not so easy to get to this, and they tell you not to mess with it, so I'm not going to argue, but it has become even a little more automated, but you should know about this. Here is a named.host file for a bind domain name server. And the reason I show you this is, while it's a bit more sophisticated than the simple host file, it has more information in it. It's also, though, similar to the host file, in that if you look near the bottom of this here, in this area, we are providing, first thing, are name servers. We're providing the name servers for these, and an A record, so we're giving it IP addresses. However, I don't want to go into bind and how to set up bind at this point. I'm just showing you there are similarities, okay? At some point along the line, everything has to resolve from a URL to an IP. And in fact, it goes further than that. At some point, it resolves from that IP to the MAC address. But let's not go there right now. Now, if you want to have a domain, you have to have a domain registration. Domain registrations are started by looking on Google or someplace for a domain registry. Like I said, I happen to use GoDaddy. There's a million of them out there. Google search, you'll find one. I think as part of the labs or homework, we ask you to actually do this and just stop short of paying for a domain. We're not saying you have to spend money, but just take a look at it so you see it. Now, in the first lab exercise for Chapter 4, which is on DNS, we again do a loring with our TCP/IP configuration and looking, and again we suggest that you look but do not touch. You don't want to break your machine or destroy your machine's connectivity to the internet. You won't be able to take this course. So, look carefully, but learn. So again, I reiterate, look but don't touch. There are some tools here you can use, and you will get some hands-on with those. There's a GUI Whois tool. The Whois tool is main. If you want to know who is, learn ubuntu.org, type that in, it'll tell you that I'm the guy that owns it, I'm the registrant, whatever. You can also try a command line interface of Whois. And again, if you want to be in this business, if you're in this for the long term, you're going to want to learn how to use some of these command line tools. Okay, because many times you're working on a server and there is no GUI. In the second lab exercise for this chapter, we're using the GUI NS lookup tool. Whois tells you who the domain is. NS lookup is to find a specific host in a domain. So there is a difference, and it's an important one to understand. We also show you in this lab exercise how to use the terminal command line interface based NS lookup tool as well. By the way, it's NS with a lowercase n, which is my Empress very nicely made that capital for me. It was not my intention. So, the name system is responsible for resolving host to IP addresses. Without the domain name system, you would either have to know the IP address or have a host file that has that resolution set for you. So as you can see, as I say at the end of every other presentation, there's no sense in me stopping now. Read all the material thoroughly. Try the lab exercises carefully. Hands-on with this and learn. Don't be afraid of it, but be cautious. We hope you join us again, because we're going to have more presentations in support of this course and our other courses. Every Saturday between noon and 2 p.m. we're either playing back a presentation with the open meeting room open, or I'm doing a live presentation. You're welcome to join us. Just make an account with Meeting Server. There's no charge for that. The account on Learn Ubuntu is free, or you can just watch the live presentation in the live window without signing up for anything. So we hope you continue to join us. You're welcome here. If you want to learn Ubuntu, that's what we're here for. Portions of this program were pre-recorded.